What you're about to see is not just a fight in Congress. It's a black congresswoman from Texas looking the head of the largest security apparatus in the United States straight in the eye and saying, "You are above the law, and I will not let this go." Jasmine Crockett walked into a hearing armed with statutes, real cases, and a resolve that very few politicians have today. And what happened after that debate was the dismissal of Secretary Kristi Noem. Let's get into it.
November 27, 2025, UC request. Officials criticized Biden vetting, but Afghan shooting suspect was granted asylum under Trump. And then September 29, 2025, Courthouse News, state sued DHS again over cuts to anti-terrorism grants for blue states.
Without objection, the gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And Madam Secretary, you are almost to the end, so congratulations. I just have a couple of questions. Are you aware that the law that was written by this Congress makes it clear that members of Congress are allowed to, entitled to enter any detention?
Representative Crockett, I apologize. I have to run to vote in another committee, Secretary, and Mr. Schmidt will chair, and you will get extra 15 seconds, but I apologize for that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much
Mr.
for your
Chairman.
testimony.
Appreciate it.
Are you aware that the law makes it clear that members of Congress are allowed to enter any detention facility at any point in time in which they choose to?
Yes, I'm aware of the visitation and oversight responsibility, and we work every day to try to accommodate members of Congress while taking into account the safety of those individuals that are being detained there.
Let me be clear. At any time, correct?
Yes, I understand there's litigation in this area.
No, that's not my question. I'm not asking you about litigation.
Yeah.
I'm asking you what the law is, because let me put it to you this way.
There's an appropriations rider that talks about
correct,
oversight.
and appropriations are law, because you are asking us to
Correct.
appropriate dollars right now for DHS, correct?
Correct.
And if we do that, you would take that as law, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that is what the law states, yet somehow, myself and another colleague, Congressman Castro, we ended up giving a 7-day notice to the Dilley detention facility because I had actually already gone to El Paso before. And when I went to that facility and I asked them why it was that they were requiring me to do something that specifically my branch of government had dictated was not required, they said it was because of you. They said you were the one that said that they were not allowed to allow us entry unless we gave a 7 days heads up. Is that true?
Yeah. The law specifically states oversight and visitations, and we are working to
My question
facilitate
is,
those. And we're at that time working
did you
to
give the instruction that members must give a 7 days heads up or not?
We had a policy in place that allowed us to get the
Did you?
staff
Were you
there
the
to
one that ordered that
facilitate.
policy?
I have a responsibility for ensuring everybody in that facility is going to be safe, and that I have adequate
no, but that's not
staff
my question, because
to
the
conduct
problem,
a tour
let me
and
tell you why we
oversight
need
at the
to
same time.
reclaiming my time. The reason that I'm talking to you about this policy and you're talking to me about safety is because I did go into the Dilley detention facility. And let me tell you, they're not safe. This is why we need to conduct oversight, because your people continue. In fact, you have lost more lives in detention than anybody else. That is your record right now. So I don't expect that y'all are going to be the ones that are going to be best to keep them safe. This is why we are supposed to conduct oversight and not wait for you to give permission. In fact, after I left the Dilley facility, we were informed of a measles outbreak that was taking place in that facility. And another question I have, are you the one that ordered it to be reopened, because that facility was closed under Joe Biden?
Those facilities were opened with the new administration. I'd have to look and
Okay, you're
see
part
if
of the
that
new
was-
administration. Were you the one that ordered it to be open is my question.
I would have to see when it was opened, because I wasn't sworn in until 5 days after.
Okay,
the
well, it
president
was
in
reopened
office.
in
So
March.
I would have to look at when
It was reopened in March of last year.
Well, then I'm sure that contract would have been renewed while I was secretary.
Speaking of contracts, as I have, actually, you know what? Let me continue on this line of y'all breaking the law. Are you familiar with a child by the name of Liam Ramos?
I am.
All right, so Liam was at this Dilley facility, and it just so happened that we had put in our 7 days notice, and y'all had grabbed him 6 days prior to our visit. So we were able to go and visit Liam. Are you aware of the court order that came down that released Liam from custody?
I am.
And are you aware that the judge said The case has its genesis in an ill-conceived and incompetently implemented government pursuit of daily deportation quotas, apparently even if it requires traumatizing children. This court and others regularly send undocumented people to prison and orders them deported, but do so by proper legal procedures. Are you aware of that?
Yes, and I would disagree with the judge on several
I'm
points
sure you would,
in
but can
there.
you tell me whether or not
That
you have a law degree?
Father chose to
Can you tell me whether or not you have a law degree?
If I have what?
A law degree.
No, I do not have a law
Okay,
degree.
and you do understand, because I can go through a bunch of court cases and orders that I disagree with from the Supreme Court, that ultimately, that is the order of the court. That is what you follow, and if you have an issue, you appeal it up, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The court went on to say, apparent also is the government's ignorance of an American historical document called the Declaration of Independence. 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson enumerated grievances against a would-be authoritarian king over his nascent nation. Among others were, he has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has excited domestic insurrection among us, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. He has kept us among, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. Are you aware that he wrote that? Do you know that he was writing about ICE that falls under you?
The judge?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. With that, I will yield, but I do have two UCs. The first UC is ICE training was slashed, records show corroborating whistleblower claims from the Washington Post on yesterday.
Without objection.
The second one is FEMA's response to Texas flood slowed by NOM's cost controls. This is out of CNN from July 10th of 2025.
Without objection.
Thank you so much.
What Jasmine Crockett did in that hearing goes far beyond a televised exchange of jabs, and reducing it to a shouting match would be a tremendous disservice to what was actually at stake. What she put on the table is one of the most serious questions in contemporary American democracy. When the executive branch starts creating its own rules to prevent the legislature from doing its job, the separation of powers stops being a constitutional principle and becomes wallpaper. American history has a name for that. It's called obstruction. And it's no surprise that authoritarian administrations around the world use exactly this mechanism. They don't explicitly ban oversight because that would be legally indefensible, but they create enough bureaucracy to make oversight practically impossible. A 7-day advance notice requirement in a country where evidence can be moved, records can be altered, and testimony can be coordinated in less than a week is not a security measure, it's a protection window. It's worth remembering that immigration detention centers in the United States operate in an extremely murky legal zone. Most detainees are not convicted criminals. They are people awaiting the processing of their cases, many with legitimate asylum requests pending. And yet the conditions that have been documented in these facilities over the years, overcrowding, lack of adequate medical care, isolation, more closely resemble maximum security prisons than civil processing centers. The fact that the number of deaths under the current DHS administration surpasses previous periods is not an abstract statistic. These are human lives that were in the custody of the American state. There's a detail in Kristi Noem's behavior during that hearing that deserves special attention and that many people missed. She used the language of balance. She said the advance notice policy sought to balance oversight access with security. That is sophisticated rhetoric because it sounds reasonable. But balance presupposes that both sides carry equal weight on the scale. Congressional oversight of federal facilities is not an administrative preference. It is a constitutional mandate. You do not balance a legal obligation against an operational convenience. That is not balance. That is evasion dressed in moderate vocabulary. And here we arrive at what I consider the deepest point of all this, the accountability crisis. The United States is living through today is not just about immigration. It's about the precedent being set. Every time Congress accepts a bureaucratic barrier without real consequences for whoever created it, the next obstacle becomes easier to justify. Crockett understood that. That's why she didn't ask politely. She confronted. Because sometimes the only adequate response to brazen conduct is absolute clarity. The legacy of hearings like this one doesn't live in the viral clip. It lives in the official congressional record, in the legal citations that attorneys will use in future proceedings, in the public pressure that forces journalists to keep covering the story. Jasmine Crockett did not walk into that room to win a debate. She went there to create a record, and that, my friends, is real politics. If this gave you a new angle on what happened in that hearing, drop a like, share it with someone who needs to see this, and tell me in the comments, do you think the U.S. Congress still has real power to hold the executive accountable, or have we already lost that check?